so good to be with you. I was listening in the worship again. When you guys were playing Silent Night, you're singing that. Oh, I don't know how to do sign language and all that. And I was at a church where they were doing it was like that. And then I get a couple things like that's Jesus, and this is, the sun moving. But in the middle of this, when everybody was going, whoa, she just started doing this. And I leaned forward and I said, what does that mean? She says, it means awesome. That's what I was just like, everybody else thought I was scratching my belly. I was just thinking, this is awesome. And that's who we want to be as a people of God. We want to be just awesome. And there's a couple of things that are going to get us there. And one of the things is just loving on people. Hey, if you brought your Bible with you, flip open to 1 John 3:16. John 3:16 is the verse about how nuts Jesus is about us. But 1 John 3:16 is the one we're going to look at, and that's like how we respond to him. 1 John 3:16, if it helps you reading the Bible while I'm reading along, read it. If it's a distraction, don't do it. Listen along. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possession, sees a brother or sister in needs and has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Listen up. Dear children, let us not love with words and speech, but with actions and truth. Isn't that great? Not just words and speech, but what you do. That's why 500 of you showed up for the fatherless thing. You guys are about the do part of faith. And my problem, I'm this recovering lawyer, right? I'm taking baby steps. I was going to say, oh, I'm Bob. You say, I love you, Bob. And then I say, it's been 100 days since I sued my last person. It hasn't, but sorry. But this is this deal, I kept agreeing with Jesus. He would say things like in Matthew 5, he would say, love your enemies. And a couple of verses later, so that you can be perfect, just like your Father in heaven is perfect. And I agree with him. I go, definitely, you guys ought to love your enemies. Not me, of course, but you guys ought to do that. And then so you could be perfect, so you could be awesome. Just like, and I want to separate those, but somehow loving our enemies and being perfect, being who we are as the body of Christ, they're linked. And so I just want to agree all the time. And Jesus just took it off the table. He said, can you even think of one time he got all the disciples together? He said, guys, just agree with me. No, he said, do stuff. And it was always a lawyer who was trying to trip up Jesus, right? It was like, what's the biggest, most important commandment? Love, God with all your heart, soul, strength, right? And then love your neighbor, even the ones that are your enemies, like that. And so I have a little stickum on my mirror in my bathroom. And I kid you not, every morning I go out the door, I slap it, and I go do my thing. It says this: love God, love people, and do stuff. And we don't do stuff, so Jesus will think we're swell. He already thinks we're swell. Your picture's in his wallet. He's nuts about you. So now that we're do that, now go do stuff. Do whatever it is, but agreeing isn't when I agree with something or I read about something, my mind tells me I'm doing something. I don't know why it is that, but I read about 1 million dead in the Congo and I'm like, okay, I'm doing my part. They're like, I'm not, and that isn't a guilt thing. Paul wrote a beautiful letter to friends like us. And he's in jail, and he said, friends, live a life worthy of the calling you've received. You don't live his calling, and you don't lead her calling. Well, just live the life worthy of calling we've received. And so what I get all confused about is that I spent all this time learning. I'd go to Bible studies, and I knew Jesus' mom's name, and I knew this wedding he went to, and then I could tell you how many boats were in the lake, right? And if I didn't know, I'd make it up because I'm a lawyer. So but I realized, what if I knew your mom's name? Wouldn't that be weird? Because you'd be we don't hang out. Or if I knew the wedding you went to, you'd be like restraining order time, right? Because you're not supposed to know that much stuff. But I was doing that to Jesus. I memorized all these facts about him, but we weren't hanging out. It was have you ever been stalked? It'd be hard to tell if they were any good at it, right? Because they collect all this information about you. But I realized I was stalking Jesus, and I was creeping us both out. So you guys, the first thing I did, I stopped going to Bible studies. I'm done. Don't get me wrong. I still meet with the same 7 guys for 10 years every Friday morning, but we call it a Bible doing. We don't just like open up and say like Lazarus raised from the dead and then say like in the Aramaic it means like way dead and in Greek it means hecka dead. And then the compelling question is, when was the last time you were dead? I'm like, now, right? And we're like, let's either head to the morgue or let's like find something we're going to do something about. And I think all of heaven is leaning over the rails just waiting for you to live into the call worthy of this calling you've received. Not like somebody else, because like Sweet Maria, if you met her, she's a knockout. Like Sweet Maria Goff is just terrific. But if I start acting like her, it'll come off like a bad Elvis impression. Like I can't be a good Maria, but I can be an awesome Bob if I just get the stuff out of the way that's blocking my view of Jesus. And for some of us, we're blocked because we don't think, we see ourselves and we go like, we can't be that guy. We can't be that girl because I'm calibrating off of you. And I got to stop that and just say, I want to live a life worthy of the calling I've received. Let me show you, when I met Sweet Maria Goff, I was smitten immediately. I'm like, that's my wife. Like, I didn't tell her that, but I'm picking out names for our kids, right? And I'm like, guys, don't do that. Like let me show you what I looked like on the day I met Maria. That! Can you believe it? Would you let your daughter date that? No, take that down. You're creeping me out. But you guys, we're the bride of Christ. And I wouldn't necessarily call us the bride of Christ. That wouldn't be the name I'd pick right off. But have you ever gone to a wedding with a 7.5 card? Like when the bride comes down, just like, I've seen better. No, not at all. And what makes the bride look so terrific is the groom knows everything about her. He knows where she's headed, who she's becoming. And that's what Jesus sees in us. You know that movie Hook? It's this like Peter Pan who's grown up to this uptight lawyer like me, except I'm not uptight. You guys have figured that out. And there's this scene where he grabs him by the face, the little boy, and he says, "There you are, Peter." Like it was like he got who he was for the first time. And I think Jesus just wants to grab us by the cheeks and say, there you are. Would you stop acting like something you're not? And you can't be who Jesus made you to be if you got a bunch of enemies. And you guys, the fix is pretty easy. Yeah, there's churches all across the country and they got signs that say, turn your cell phones off when you come in. Forget it, turn them on. If you come to worship and your brother has something against you, get a hold of him, square it away, just text him. The short version is this, sorry, right? And the long version is let's talk soon. And then press send. And you know why they're your enemy? And why my enemies are my enemies? Because they stink at people. They stink at me. They stink at you. Right? And so when you get a reply to your text that said sorry, and they say you should be, don't be bummed out about that. Say I'm doing my part because I want to be perfect, like my Father in heaven is perfect. I want to be awesome. And I can't get there. If stuff's blocking my view of Jesus, I just am not going to get there. And one thing we don't need a Bible study to know is that we're called to lift up the hurting. Amen? That's who we are. There's a pastor asked if I'd come speak at his church, and there's maybe just 1,000 people that come. And he called me a couple days before the service and said, I just got the news that my son, who's 8, has leukemia. And there's no good version, but he got a really bad version. And so I did the talk, and then at the end, he's sitting right here, and that would be the time where you lay hands on him, right? But it's really the 3 dudes that are next to him that are touching him, and the guy in row 50 is touching the guy in row 49. And then I had an idea. I said, what if we crowd surf him? Do you have that picture? That's who we are. If you want to know who the body of Jesus Christ is, it's that. We don't have just a symbolic faith. We lift each other up. And we don't let go unless you got 5 strong people holding on, right? We're just going to settle for a symbolic faith anymore. We hold on, and that's a guy racked in agony and enveloped in love. And you guys, we don't have to convince people about Jesus. When we act like the body of Christ that we were made to be, it'll be like Harry met Sally. Like people will be like, I want what they're having, right? Because it's working. If we're that, we'll change a whole community. We'll change us. We'll become who we were made to be. And here's my deal. Have you guys ever been to Madame Tussauds, that wax museum? Right? It's like I saw Michael Jackson. He's alive. He's there. He's the fourth guy. So I was in like Washington, D.C., and I had this trench coat, and I got these whiskers and a suit, my best clip-on tie, right? And I asked the kids, you want to go to Madame Tussauds? And they said, sure. So we go downstairs to where all the wax dudes are, and I lined up between the third and fourth wax dude. And they're like, Dad, would you act your age? And I'm like, I am. So I froze. What I wasn't counting on, these two little old ladies. They come around the corner. They walked up to me and they pulled my whiskers. Ah! And they said, he looks so real. And you guys, because I'm a lawyer, I know I can't like move because they'll have a stroke and own my house. So I'm like, I was just take it like a man. And when they moved a couple wax people away, I said, like, I'm not wax. And the kids are like, taxi, right? I'm out of here. But you know what I realized about myself? I'm a poser. That's probably why I'm a pretty good lawyer. I'm like a poser, and some of you are too. And we got to stop it. We just got to be who Jesus made us to be. And if we live into that, man, it'll change everything. I wrote this book, and Thomas Nelson said, would you write a book? I said, I don't know. Would you build a school? I said, how big's the school? He said, 260 kids, 40 teachers, northern Uganda, rocked their life, just coming out of the Civil War. And they said, big school. I said, big book, right? So I made them pay me in advance because I'm a lawyer. So I don't know if it'd be any good. So we did this school, press send on the thing. And on the last page of the book, I asked them, could I put my cell phone number in there? You guys, they thought I was smoking crack. I'm like, yes, it'd be great because me and you, we're not Jesus, right? But we're supposed to act like him. And the more it seemed like the more available Jesus got, it was corresponding with the less time he had, right? He just got more and more available. I can't lie, I could use a good fast or two, and you get this hunger pain and think about some spiritual principle. Every time the phone rings, I just say nobody goes to voicemail. Because have you ever gotten a voicemail message and it's 4 minutes and 30 seconds long, and you're like, dude, get to the point. Like if Jesus starts screening my calls, like he'll realize there's no point. I just wanted to talk to him. And we can fix it for people by saying hello. Are you kidding me? That's who we are. But we can't get there unless we start moving back from these myths that we start believing. People like do some Jedi thing and get us to believe it. Here, help me finish the sentence. Never go to the grocery store when you're baloney. I'm like, how many times have you guys been like in college and you're starving and you drive by this grocery store and say, I can't go in there. They have food. Like, no. You're like, hungry? Grocery store, right? Or how about this? Don't have any expectations. You're kidding me. You guys are kids of a king. Expect that Jesus is going to do terrific things through you. If you'll just make a little space for that. Like we're the ones that live in constant expectation. I tried a number of years ago to know one unschooled ordinary person and one person in power in every country in the world. And I'm not there yet, but I know quite a few, at least unschooled ordinary people. And there's a guy I know, I know you guys. We measure our economy with gross national product, right? And there's one country that said, we're not doing that anymore. We're measuring gross national happiness. Isn't that great? It's the king of Bhutan. I'm like, so I know some dude in Bhutan. He's like 6'8". He'd block the sun. And each guy in Bhutan's like 4'8", right? So I called him up and I said, is this for real about the king? And he said, it is. And I said, well, so how do people meet the king? Because I'd really like to. And he laughed. He said, I play basketball with him on Wednesday. I'm like, of course you do. You're huge. So I said, well, what are the chances that you could hook me up and I could meet the king? And he said, I don't know, like 1 in a million. And I'm thinking like you guys, so you're saying I have a chance, right? And so every single morning, including this morning, I got out of bed, and you know what I thought first thing? Today might be the day I meet the King. And you guys, we know Jesus. We know the King. You get to meet him every single day if we start thinking like living in constant expectation. So don't believe these myths anymore. But we've got to, wouldn't you agree, everybody wants to make a difference in the world, but only a few people want to live differently. But we got to be the ones that live differently then. So I'll tell you a couple things I do. Every single Thursday, I quit something. Isn't that great? I gave notice at my office. The landlord said, why? I'm like, it's Thursday. I quit stuff. They're like, you guys can quit cussing if you want or don't, whatever. What if you do this? Do you have a full, is the plate full for you? No room to move? They make TV shows about you guys, hoarders. You get so much stuff in your life, you can't even navigate your living rooms anymore. So this Quit Something Thursday is terrific. I like girls, if you're in a tough marriage, you just got to hang in there. But if you're just dating the guy, break up with him. When he says, why? Say, it's Thursday. I quit stuff on Thursday. I quit you. I came to my office, I kid you not, a couple of weeks ago. I come to my office, and this letter is sitting there for me. It's from my secretary. It says, Dear Bob, I quit. It's dated Thursday. So I walked in. I said, Deborah, did I hurt your feelings? And she said, no. I said, well, do you not like your job anymore? And she said, no, I love it here. So he just said, well, then I don't accept your resignation. Sue me. What if we do this? We're the ones that are making some margin. And for some of you, you've got stuff blocking your view of Jesus. And you know what it is? And heavens don't have a Bible study about it. Stop it. Just stop. You know what it is? You can bury it. Pull up a bush out there. Bury it. And just say, done today. Why? Because. Right? It worked because it's blocking my view of Jesus. It's making me so I can't live into the person that Jesus made me to be. And if we do that, man, it'll change everything. One of the women that got this book called, and she said, I just read the book, and I'd gotten some really bad news yesterday. I have a brain tumor. And I was like, what? That's got to feel so heavy. She said, well, that's not the biggest part. In order, they're going to operate on me on Wednesday, and to get to the tumor, they have to take out the part of my brain that lets me talk. And I said, what are you thinking? When these are some of the last conversations you're having with people. And you know what she said? She said, I'm being really picky about what I say. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a lesson for us? Be picky about what we say. Maybe fewer words of correction to one another, more words of affirmation, right? Like Jesus, like Peter says, I don't even know the dude. And what does he say? He says, Peter, you're a rock. He doesn't say, Peter, you're a wuss. He says, no, you're a rock. He wasn't trying to make him feel good. He saw who he was becoming. And if we could see that for other people, Adam Goff, he's, just starting college, and I have an old Beaver seaplane. Do you know what those are? They take off and land on the water. They'd make them out of beef jerky if they could. They're like guy planes. So they're kind of rickety because they're from the 40s. So we've been flying around up this place in Canada now for a decade, looking at this lake at the bottom of this 4,000-foot canyon. And the lake looks like 2 glasses of water end to end when you're way up there. And it's a really narrow canyon. And once you enter it, there's no other, you got to land the plane. You can't turn around halfway. There's no out. So I told 5 weeks ago, I'm up there with Adam, and I said, Adam, let's go land the plane. He's like, no. I'm like, yes. So we turn, and the wingtip is probably from here to the wall over there from this granite cliff. And so you put in all the flaps with all these hydraulics, and they come out like big dining room tables. And then you pitch down 4,000 feet and make a big turn. And then you really need to pitch forward because you got to get on the water or you hit the trees, right? So I pitch forward, I get on the water. We're like chest bumping each other. We landed! Yeah! And so then I turned to Adam and I said, okay, Adam, you take us out of here. And he's like, no! So we take the plane back into the weeds. And remember in Back to the Future, the DeLorean has to be going 88 miles an hour? Right? Well, a beaver has to go 52. So if you go pull back at 48, you dig in the floats, you hit the trees. Right? And if you go 60, you run out of lake, you hit the trees. So we're back there. Adam gets in the left seat where all the controls are, and I just sat in the right seat. And so he threw in all the throttle like a big dog, and we're going 30, 40, 50, 60. And I'm like thinking, pull up. So, but I didn't say anything. And he pulled back, and we cleared these trees, and we're like, yeah, like eyes on the road, but yeah. And then I told Adam, you take us back in there and land on the lake. He's like, no. So he turns the plane, he puts the flaps in, and you guys, he's like from here to that post from the cliff, but I didn't say anything. And then he was like coming in kind of hot, but I didn't say anything. And he made a turn at the end of that canyon that if it was on YouTube, it would have gone viral. I didn't know a plane could do that. And we passed where I landed, and we were still 50 feet up in the air, and I didn't say anything. And then it wasn't pretty, but he got it on the water, and the trees were getting pretty big. And it landed, and that kid that entered the canyon, 19, landed the plane 38. And you know what? For an oftentimes silent God, I know now what it feels like to be a father next to a son who I love and not give him constant words of correction. You know what I was thinking the whole time? Land the plane. Right? And that's what heaven is saying to you. You know what it is. You know what's blocking your view of Jesus or who you're faking it like or whatever, and you're like, or how you could get to the do part. And all of heaven just saying, like, land the plane. And if we do that stuff, if we got that right, we would get so much right. It would just be uncanny. One of the things that I know that I was called to, and not because I heard God's audible voice, is justice. And so we started going to Uganda about 9 years ago. And then I know Jesus is just nuts about justice. He loves kids. He hates lawyers, but he's nuts about justice, and he loves kids. And we just started going into jail cells. Do you have a picture of a Ugandan jail cell? This is a cell in Uganda. And we found these 13 boys. They'd been in there for 3 years. And if I don't want like your son hanging out with my daughter, I just accuse him of defilement, and that day he goes to prison. And 3 years later, these kids are 15, do the math. These 12-year-olds go to prison, and they're there. There's a plastic bucket in the back, and they open the door an hour a day. We just said, like you, I don't know all the steps, but I know the next step. So I bought the entire Ugandan law library, both books. And I just started briefing cases. I wasn't invited to, but you aren't invited to. Here, I'm telling you, you're invited. Like whatever it is that feels like the call you've received, do lots of that. And so we tried the first 100 cases, and we dropped off 98 kids with all the charges resolved. Isn't that evidence of Jesus? There's this terrific beginning to the book of Acts. And I love that it's called a book of Acts, not a book of opinions. It's like Theophilus, lover of God. Look for many convincing proofs that Jesus is still alive. Isn't that terrific? Like dust for fingerprints. Don't fake it. Just like look for evidence that he's alive. And even though I've been asking God all these times to talk to me, like give me an audible word, a sentence, something, I tell him I'll keep it all attorney-client privilege. Like I won't tell I tell you guys, but I wouldn't tell anybody else. Like, but I don't hear from him. And even though he could make rocks talk, you know why I don't think he's talking to me, kind of giving me the silent treatment audibly, is because I'd stopped listening to you. And I'm counting on you to be picky with your words. Picky, words not just blowing sunshine at each other, but words of truth and affirmation and love. Not always just words of correction. It isn't bad, but like just tell each other, land the plane. If we're doing that, land the plane in your faith, land the plane in your relationships. And like, if we got that part right, it would just like change so much. So we just started doing this, and it's really, what I tried to do is this. Like there's so many things that each of us is able to do. And I spent a lot of time doing just stuff I was able to do, but a couple years ago it changed a little bit. I've been trying to figure out what is it that I'm made to do, and then do a lot of that, right? So don't settle for a symbolic faith or just doing what you're able to do. Say, what am I made to do? And that'll change from time to time. Somebody asked me what faith is like. There's an old key on a typewriter. And the typewriter, you know, if I sent you an email and I said, what? I'd say, what? And there'd be a question mark and an exclamation point. This is this key. It's called an interrobang. It's on a typewriter. Isn't that great? It was like both together. And I would say, if somebody said, tell me about faith in Christ and what it means to follow him, I'd say it's like an interrobang. Say I'd have a lot of questions, but I want to put the exclamation marks after the right stuff. Amen? That's what we want to do. Somebody wants to ask you about what's your opinion about this over there, and I'm like, oh, I'm just not there yet. I'm like, someday I'll get there, but for right now, I'm just going to put the exclamation marks after Jesus. And then after my family, and after the circle of friends that God's dropped you in the middle about. And there'll be a bunch of questions, but I don't need to figure out all those. Instead, what I'm going to do is just love on Jesus in an unconventional, not traditional way. And when we do that, people won't be afraid. And isn't that the message all throughout the Bible, right? God tells Moses, you're taking over, Joshua, you're taking over for Moses. And remember what he says? Joshua, be not afraid. Isn't that great? And then he taps Jeremiah. He says, Jeremiah, you're the guy. And like a lot of us, we say, we're not the guy. And God says, be not afraid. You getting it? And then in Genesis, he says to Abram after a big fight, I'm your shield and your great reward. Be not afraid. And then some guys in a rowboat, and Jesus walks out and says, it is I. Be not afraid. If we got the be not afraid part, guess what? We could start acting like us. And then not only will we not be afraid, but everybody around us won't be afraid anymore, right? There's a woman who bought a house from us. 17 years ago, we moved from our house across the street, right? And Maria just thought we were moving there because I was too cheap to get a moving van, right? But the reality was I was just too cheap to get a moving van. So 17 years ago, there was this thing in California, you could actually sell a house. You'd have to look it up in Wikipedia. You didn't have to give it back to the bank. You could sell it. And there's these thing called buyers. It's weird. So we put the for sale sign in. We had 5 buyers, but I wasn't looking for a buyer. I was looking for a neighbor, right? And then Carol came, and I'm a hugger. Don't even try to shake my hands because this ain't a business trip, right? I'm a hugger. I'm like, oh, you're our neighbor. And so for all these years now, I've been calling up Carol on the cell phone just because I don't want her all alone because she's a widow and she's 60 at the time she moved in. And so I'd call her up to see how she's doing. And this year when I called her, she said, Bob, I got back and I got some bad news. I have cancer. And I said, Carol, I am never calling you on the phone again. And she's like, so I went to Radio Shack and I got us 2 walkie-talkies. And I set up one next to her bed, and I set up one next to mine. And this whole year, we've been talking on the walkie-talkies. The first time I called her, I said, hello, Carol. You have to make the sound. Hello, Carol. She said, Bob, is that you? I'm like, who else would it be, right? But we've been talking, and you know what? When you're on walkie-talkies, you're 14 years old. Nobody has cancer. You're up in tree forts. And you know what happened? Carol just wasn't afraid anymore. Didn't fix her cancer. Just made her not afraid. And those words echo through Scripture. Be not afraid. Who did I make you to be? Live into the calling worthy of this call you've received, right? Land the plane. And last month, Carol took a turn, and I don't know what happened, but they removed all kinds of stuff. And so I visited her in the hospital in the recovery room, and there's tubes going everywhere. And so I went up to the nurse that's looking after her, and I just gave her a walkie-talkie. And I said, will you bring that into her room? And I sat in the next room, and we just had a good cry. And I said, hello, Carol? And there's this long, silence and some fumbling around. And she said, Bob, is that you? People, that's who we are. That's how we roll, and it's messy, and it's all that. But we got to do that stuff, not agree. I can't keep agreeing for you that y'all ought to forgive your enemies so you can be perfect. I need to work on me being perfect. And then we get to come up with our own words. It's like a word exchange, right? When you say will you pray for me? I just say silently to myself, I'll breathe for you, right? Just in and out. You come to a word like Jesus with them, right? Or if they say will you hold me accountable? I think Jesus didn't use that. I get the idea, and you do too, but he held everybody close. So I just think for myself, when they say, will you hold me accountable? I'm I'll hold you close, right? It's like needle exchange, but nobody gets AIDS. You just get to come up with words that mean way more to you so you can live into the life God made for you. There's a little boy, And there's this horrible practice in Uganda, which is child sacrifice. And Uganda doesn't have a monopoly on it, but they're just awfully good at it. And this little kid gets abducted, and we'll just say his name is Charlie, and he gets abducted by the biggest, baddest witch doctor in all of northern Uganda. You have a picture of Kabi? This is Kabi. I texted a friend, Dawn, from his trial. I said, I'm looking into the eyes of just pure evil. And Kabi had taken this little boy, Charlie, into the bush, and the belief is that the head or the blood or the private parts of a little boy have all these magical powers, and 863 kids have gone missing this year to witch doctors in Uganda. So it isn't just like the odd thing. The problem is this: nobody's ever taken a witch doctor to trial because the judges are all afraid that they'll do this like thing and, bad things happen to them. And there's always a victim, but they're always dead. But then Jesus shows up, and this little 4-footer shows up and stands up and says, that is the man that tried to kill me. Can I introduce you to Charlie? This is the little kid that changed what 33 million people in Uganda think about witch doctors, because he stood up, because he didn't die. When I met him the first time, I asked, what were you thinking when you were taken into the bush? He said, I woke up from this thing, realized what happened, and then I decided this, I love God, and I'm not dying today. Great, be not afraid. That's what he did. I don't know what it's going to be like when you and I get to heaven. Don't you hope Jesus just touches your nose? Don't you hope he just goes you rascal, you were who I made you to be. But let me ask you this. So Charlie's horribly hacked up with this machete, and so there's a doctor, and he's trying to learn how to fly a seaplane. And so the person teaching him tells him all about Charlie and what happened. He lands the plane, and he calls me up at home and said, Bob, my name is Randy, and I know you don't know me, but I heard what happened to this little boy, and I can fix him. And I said, buddy, you didn't hear what got cut off, because you can't fix that. He said, I'm the chief of surgery at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I can fix him. And I said, what? So we go up to meet with this guy, and he's drawing out on a piece of paper what he's going to do. I'm like, no, you can do that? And so he's taking some leg and some arm, and he's going to hook him up. I'm like, no, what would that cost? And he said, it would be staggering, but I'll do it for nothing. Evidence of Jesus? He said, I'll get Cedars-Sinai. Yeah, he said, I'll get Cedars-Sinai to pick up all the costs of the hospital stay too. And 190 days ago, Cedars-Sinai writes a check for $50,000. And I go to Uganda to get the 4-footer. And this is a kid who's never seen a plane, right? Right. Oh, I go, because he didn't have a dad, I become his dad. I become his legal guardian. And then we get on the plane, and we fly to London. As we're getting off the plane, he says, could we just walk the rest of the way? I'm like, oh, buddy, sorry. I got to digress for a second. Do you guys have buddies that you play pranks on? I've got this buddy, Doug. He's a soft target, low-hanging fruit. So, sorry, Doug. Whatever, sue me. So he made the mistake of telling me where he was spending his 15-year wedding anniversary. Oh, big mistake. So I took Sweet Marie. He got the presidential suite of this hotel. I took Sweet Maria. We checked in as them. So we get in the elevator. We go up. The elevator opens into the room. You get it? That nice. And so I order lobster and creme brulee, and we get seconds. We dance, and then we tidied up, and we split. And the whole idea is Doug would get there, have this great evening, and when he checked out, he got a $400 bill from me. He's like, Bob. Now, he's been trying to get me back now for years, but he can't because I'm a lawyer, right? So I get a call from this guy. I can't lie. It's a pretty convincing Ugandan accent. He talked about the stuff that Doug knew I was doing in Uganda. He said, this is Ambassador Kamununweri. I'm the ambassador from Uganda to the United States, and I've heard what you're doing, and I'd like to know if you'll be counsel for the Republic of Uganda. So I covered the phone. He said, Maria, it's Doug. He says he's the ambassador. He wants me to be the lawyer for Uganda. I'll say yes. So I said, awesome, that would be good. Does somebody owe you money? So he says, I'm leaving for Uganda for 2 months, and I'll call you when I'm back. I figured Doug's silly prank had kind of gone its course. The phone rings 2 months later. It's Doug. He says, this is Ambassador Kamununweri, and you need to meet me in New York on Saturday. So I said, yes. Now, I'm getting off the plane at JFK, thinking there's going to be a sign that says, like, gotcha or something. And at the bottom of the ramp are all these people from Uganda's cabinet. I'm like, ah! And this guy runs over to me and he says, I'm Ambassador Kamununweri. And I said, of course you are. And he introduces me as Uganda's new consul. And I said, you said like counsel, like lawyer. He said, no, I said consul like diplomat. Evidence of Jesus? I'm like, yes! So you guys, I'm the consul for Uganda. Yeah, that makes, oh my gosh, if you guys totally, if you totally screw up and need to seek asylum, Scott Street, I'll meet you there. My house is Uganda. I kid you not, somebody stole my car. The guys with the like top ramen coming out of the air and like dude guns come, because it's a mission of a foreign government. How cool is that? I got to tell you the best part of being about the consul for Uganda. I've got these flags for my truck. It's a little much, but man, you got the flags, you're using them, right? But the best part, you guys, I've got bitchin' license plates. I could park anywhere. I could park in the sanctuary here. What? You know what's even better than that, you guys? I kid you not. I have diplomatic immunity. I could kill you. I could. Evidence of Jesus. So here's the problem with my plans. Maybe it's the same problem you have. My plans work. And we get these puny little returns that come with our plans. And that's why in 1 Corinthians 1:25, God said, like, not many of you were wise, and not many of you were powerful, not many of you were influential, but he uses the foolish things to like confuse and confound the wise, the things that are not, to displace the things that are, and here's the punchline, so that no one would boast. But if we boast about the Lord. So I get off the plane with Charlie, and there's an email in my inbox, and the email says White House on it. I'm like, Doug, right? Because the message was really simple. It just says, we'd like to meet Charlie. So I make a couple calls. It's for real, you guys. And I buy 2 tickets on zero notice from London to DC. I'm still making payments. Like, so we find this kid that 2 days before is standing in the bush in Congo, is now standing in the Oval Office. God does that stuff to blow our minds about how good he is. And if we could just be who he made us to be, then we could see really clearly who he made us to like infect in the world. We just want to be like that 4-foot kid. We want to be the people that keep saying yes. The ones that'll call people and say like, sorry. Even though there's a reason they're on the list. Jesus isn't interested in the reason. He just says, I want you to be perfect, right? So this kid, we go from the Oval Office to Disneyland, right? Because any kid that's going to get that operation needs to go to the happiest place on earth, right? You're going to feel a little pinch. So we show up at Cedars-Sinai the next day, and Charlie's in his scrubs, and Randy's in his scrubs, and I gave Charlie a little kiss on the forehead, and I said, Charlie, be not afraid. And Randy Sherman hooked him up. And that's evidence of Jesus, and it's all around us. We just got to see it. But let me ask you this. The way my world works, there's terrific kids like Charlie, and there's like really rotten guys like Cobby. But I don't know if God sees it that way. So I asked the next time I was in Kampala, I asked the warden at the prison. Lizira Maximum Security Prison was built for 200 death row guys. There's 3,000 men in Lizira. There's one door. There's no windows. And so I went under this door, and Cobby came in, and he took a knee. And he started talking about how bad he felt about what he'd done to Charlie. And I thought, well, you just feel bad you like got caught. Then he started talking about witchcraft and where it had taken him in his life. And then his words, not mine, said, you know what I really need? I need forgiveness. And I felt like I was talking to a criminal hanging on a cross next to Jesus. The one Jesus turns to and says, you get paradise. And you know what, folks? I didn't want him to go because he's my enemy. He hurt my friend. But isn't it terrific that Jesus' ability to forgive us isn't limited by our ability to get it? And Cobby comes to Christ. And I got no shelf for that. But that's how good God is. He wants to do these things so we'll understand more about who we are and more about who he is. So every time I'm in Uganda now, I meet with this brother in Christ, Kabi. And it's tough. He's going to die in this prison. And I asked the warden, has anybody presented the gospel message to all 3,000 death row guys? She said, we don't let outside people come in and do that. I said, well, Kabi's already here. Could he do it? And the warden inexplicably said yes. And so 3 weeks ago, Kabi and I held hands in Lazira Maximum Security Prison, and Kabi presented the gospel message to 3,000 men that are going to die. And you know what? Kabi screwed it up. You know the only thing he got right? Jesus. That's all you need to get right. And the prisoners started coming. And then Kabi is baptizing these guys with water. I'm like, I don't know if it's right. It's like it's happening. Like it's this interrobang. Like, I don't get that. Like, can he do that? And then he turns to me, and we're still holding hands, and he said, Bob, I want you to know that I forgive you. I'm like, you can't do that. Like, you're the bad guy. I was right. But you know what? Then I realized Kabi's trying to be perfect. And he knows he can't be perfect if I'm his enemy. I'm like, oh, God, just use us to be picky with our words and then to listen to each other and let those words land on our hearts that just need to be just like carpet bombed with Kabi's refreshing love. When the judge signs the death penalty order, he signs it and he takes the pen and he breaks it. And he throws it off the table. And he says, what's been done today will never be undone. And it's one of those gulp moments because Kabi's going to die. And that's what God did with Jesus. He takes him, he breaks him, and he says, what's been done today will never be undone. There's this beautiful verse in Romans 8, and it says, neither life nor death, neither angels nor demons, neither present nor future, nor any power, neither heights nor depths, nor anything will ever, it's almost like a Taylor Swift song, ever separate us from the love of God. And it won't separate me, and it won't separate Kabi, and it won't separate you. I've been married to Maria for 26 years and 4 months, but who's counting, right? I've been loving her for 29. Here's the deal. Like, she keeps telling me this, Bob, work the plan. And I'm like, okay, but she never tells me what the plan is. Like, but she doesn't. If you don't hear God's audible voice, like all this good stuff that I have for you, who I made you to be uniquely in love and the beautiful stuff in your life, that. And then this stuff like your pride and the stuff that you're afraid of that's blocking your view of Jesus, not that. And if we got that part right, we get it all right. The only thing we need to get right is this: be not afraid.